Yeah, okay, welcome back from the coffee break. My name is Sebastian and I will talk a bit about the test infrastructure in EasyBuild. So, a bit about me. I joined JC since 2020. I'm working here in two divisions, and cloud admin, mainly now on the cloud side. And the second division I'm in is the accelerating devices lab. There I'm mainly doing benchmarking accelerators. I'm leading the JC software team since 2022, and since 2021 I'm the EasyBuild maintainer, so some of you may know from GitHub or from Tech. And since recently I'm also part of the EasyBuild steering committee that Ken has presented in. Okay, I will take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the cloud that we here have at JC that we are also using for the test that we are running in EasyBuild. The JC cloud is based on OpenStack, and here I have a nice picture of the cloud. It's actually not all of the racks are part of the cloud, but only the two left racks are part of the cloud, and we are currently adding one rack to the side because we need more power in the cloud. The other racks are of the HPC system, the use of HPC system. I like hardware, so I brought a little bit of an overview what we have as hardware in the JSP cloud. And you already see it's quite different from what you expect from an HPC system. On an HPC system, you usually have the same nodes and then lots of nodes, but here we have a lot of different nodes, yeah, and also the node count is much smaller. So we have then three nodes, the ones with only CPUs, and then 4 nodes with NVIDIA A100. But you see the CPU nodes have also NVMe, and the NVMe and the GPUs, they can be used via PCIe Express pass-through. So you can spawn actually a VM and then get a GPU. Yeah, if you want to use some GPU. Or if you have some IO heavy workloads, you can use the NVMe. Then we have also then 2 nodes. They are a bit older. Nodes, and then 16 GPU nodes with a V100. This is not all, there is more. So yeah, we decided that it makes sense to have only one big cloud. So before we had HDF cloud, which is the older OpenStack cloud that we had here at JSC, but we are currently migrating all the workloads from the HDF cloud to the JSC cloud, and therefore the hardware, the Intel Skylake and Intel Cascade Lake nodes, they are free, so we will integrate them also in JSC so that we have more compute power there. Then, yeah, we have also housing nodes. These are nodes that are bought from an institute. Yeah, just wanted to have these nodes with AMD GPUs on their workloads, and we have them as well. Very recently, we are also adding 8 Zen 4 nodes. They are more for inference, so they have their RTX A6000 GPU, and yeah, in the future, blah 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 will. So in total, we have 12,000, about 12,000 CPUs, 36 terabyte of memory, a few different generations of GPUs, and the storage here is the storage backend for the cloud, and there we have the current system that we are using, which is JustCom. It's based on IBM Spectrum Scale and then using NFS to the cloud. But this one is the old storage system because currently we are also bringing up the new storage. Because this one is running out of support in a few months, so we need a new one. One is actually based on Ceph, and here we will also have different tiers of memory. We will have HDDs for large capacity, and then we have NVMe's for the workloads that need the faster storage. So it's also getting a little bit bigger, and the main difference here is that we will use Ceph instead of NF. Okay. Now let's come to the test infrastructure that we use for EasyBuild. So, as some of you might have noticed, Generoso is no longer available. We had that for quite a long time and we used that. but it's now offline, and currently we have then the AMD 100 based runners, which are JSeason3 and JSeason. Those are the ones that you can use for test reports. You can ask BuildleBot to produce a test result, and you see here in the picture that is a output that you then get. That is already nice. That's quite helpful for us to review pull request, but of course it has a problem. All the other architectures and all the other operating systems that you need to test manually. Yeah? And the question is, how can we improve that? So, had a discussion at the EasyBuild Maintainer Summit, how can we improve that, and that's what I want to present here. We had a couple of ideas, and one of them is that we want to switch to event-based bot, similar to what's done in Easy. So currently we have this BuildleBot, and it's a cron job that runs every 10 minutes. And then when he sees a mention, he will trigger a job. It's submitted to the Slurm cluster, which is on the cloud. And then, so if you are unlucky, you will submit your comment in GitHub right after the cron job has run. So you have to wait 10 minutes. In Easy, it's different. It's event-based, so it will pick up much faster, and you have to wait less. Also, one important topic is the testing. So which kind of operating system, which kind of CPU do we want to test? Ones that are commonly used, which one can we get access to? Some of you know that we have this repository, EasyBuild, where we have quite a large collection of different containers that we can use for that. And the idea is to use them more in the test. Another idea that we discussed was that we could trigger additional tests based on the label. So for example, if you have a PR that is targeting RISC-V and that has the RISC-V label, it would be nice to automatically run that on a RISC-V. So let's come to the different combination of. We have discussed that it would be nice to have different tiers. So here is the tier 1. Tier 1 means that a test fails. This will block the PR. And these are the most common environments. So we think that it makes sense to have two. One is the current one that we have, the JSeason3 100. These are AMD CPUs, 9, and the most default EasyBuild configuration. We're using LMOD, and the are somewhat minimal. Yeah? This one is currently available, but of course it's using another idea that would be nice to test is Intel CPUs. Here the idea is to use a very minimal setup, which implies even removing Perl, and then also use non-ARP. Then for tier 2, it's we discussed that it would be nice to have a tier 2. That means it's not blocking the PR if it fails, but we can open it, and then other people know that this was tested and it. For tier 2, we thought about one ARM-based filter depth, and for example, a hierarchical model. Second one here in the tier 2, that Ubuntu container. So it has a lot of dependencies or packages installed, like Boost 1. And here we want to use or to test environment. This one, basically is available. So it's in the castle cluster that we are running currently. So the Zen 2, it's available in the Magic Castle cluster that we have currently on our cloud, but it's not yet accessible through Bögelbot. But in principle, it is there. It can be used. Tier 3 is then, yeah, the ones where we don't have a bot, where we have to manually trigger the tests. These are, for example, for commercial softwares where you need to have a license, or AMD are not that common at the moment, and RISC-V. Okay, I already mentioned the event-based bot, like in Easy, and here you got most of you, or the ones that are using already Easy, might know that. Okay, and now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about these ideas? Do you have comments, questions, feedback?
I can make a comment about the event-based bot. So we've been looking into this a lot lately because I really want this to happen, this adoption, and I want to make the bot be able to behave in such a way that's good for Easy. So right now, it's a bit chatty. It says a lot of stuff in a PR, but also to be able to write into a PR, it has an awful lot of permissions, and they're too much. So we have to figure out, well, I know we have a good idea about how to approach this, but we actually need to implement it. But we need to reduce this for security stuff. We need to pare this back a little bit.
Just to clarify that, one thing we learned, or that Alan figured out recently, if you have a GitHub token that can post a comment in a PR, it actually has write access to the PR as well, which is just way too much, and it's a bit weird that GitHub doesn't split these permissions.
On the permission subject, imagine I'm very generous and said I want to give you some access to our cluster because we are using IP version 6, which is quite the push forward to in the US. And we also have some L40S, for example, and we've got an Gracehopper, whatever. You know, I'm generous. How can I be sure that it doesn't get abused? So if an idiot, pardon me, starts off doing nasty things, we were just talking about the tokens, and suddenly my cluster is full of test runs, and I'm running around with my head under the arm.
One part of the answer there is that the EasyBot has to be configured to allow certain GitHub accounts to talk to it. Like random people on the internet can try to talk to the bot, it will just flat out ignore them. So this kind of security things are built into the EasyBot. That will already be helpful. Now, it is very generous. Hello? Okay. It is very generous to offer additional hardware, but it's also important for us that we're able to make changes to that test setup without having to ask certainly a single individual. So yeah, with all the hardware we get in Jülich, that's very helpful. We have Sebastian and maybe also Jan and other people in Jülich we can reach out to if we need to. But we also want to prevent relying on a single person that manages the test infrastructure, right? So it's a bit of a, yeah.
And that's the big positive with being able to use a cloud environment like that. Sebastian's okay with us having administrator rights, like he trusts us to have administrator rights there, so there's a fallback to different people who can reconfigure that environment. And they have a decent spectrum of hardware. It could be expanded. I mean, you're already hosting, like if somebody wants to spend some money and send them some hardware, it's a chance, right? But it's possible, right, at least.
Yeah, Mikhail has a comment, can't we use API tokens with more fine-grained permissions? And we've looked at that, I think, and it's really just the GitHub permission model that's broken. There's no more fine-grained permissions, I think, for write access to PRs, which is what you need to post comments in PRs. Maybe we've overlooked something, but I think Caspar, me, and Alan looked at it, and we haven't. Yeah, we haven't seen anything even through fine-grained permission tokens.
I just want to make a remark because you said like, okay, we want multiple people to be able to fix the test infrastructure if it doesn't work, right? But on the other hand, like we have this distinction between tier 1 and tier 2, whereas tier 1 is blocker and tier 2 is not. I don't see a particular problem in people contributing tier 2 testing infrastructure where we say like, hey, if it's available, you know, it might be good to give it a go. If we suspect issues with IPv6, let's give it a go. If it's not available, okay, you know, we'll ask York, hey, it's not working, but there's no rush to fix it. We'll just not block the PR, we'll go ahead.
The tiering does help, yeah, indeed. Now, what we also want to avoid is not test in 100 different configurations, even if it's tier 3, because then we're going to overload the information as well, and then PRs will not get merged for testing reasons. I mean, the more you test, the more problems you will find.
You will always find something for sure.
So, and then you want to fix those problems before you move on. So it is a balance as well. Yeah. Well, in one of your the tier 1 level things, both of them are Rocky 9, which to me doesn't make sense because we still see a lot of RHEL 8 based stuff as well. So
what we discussed, but we can of course change one.
Yeah, and maybe we overlooked that aspect. But I think one of these should be Rocky 8 or maybe even Alma Linux 8 to pull it open a little bit more, but not too much. Yeah.
Ideally, what I would like also to see is that all this information is not lost in the PR, because right now we have all this testing and then you get the green light as a comment in the PR. But then when you install whatever is the config in your system, that information is not there. So as a wishful thinking option, it would be nice that all this information ends up in the easy config somehow. And actually EasyBuild tells me if the thing I'm trying to install is tested in the architecture or the system I'm actually using.
Yeah, then you need to be able to update the PR as well, of course, and then you're back to the right permission thing. But there's actually already a feature in EasyBuild, and I'm not sure it still works because it's been there since the early days. But there's like a build stats easy config parameter that I think it's in the easy config file that gets stored in the installation directory, has like build information about the build. How long did it take? How many cores? What was the version of the OS? The timestamp, all of that. So yeah, we could push that back. I wouldn't push it into the easy configs though, because that's going to become a mess. But somewhere else, a database, or maybe just in a separate Git repository where we drop YAML files in directories with the easy config file name. I don't know, just spitballing, but it could make sense to collect that information in a way that you can programmatically then also access it again.
Yeah, because one thing you could do is, I mean, you know, the PR that a commit came from, you could like collect this information as part of like a release. So you could say, oh, I know this easy config came from that PR. I can use the GitHub API to see on the that commit status, what was the, you know, if it's reported in that place, what was the information around that, and then I could package that somehow that it could be queried right from EasyBuild itself, right? So rather than having them to go back to the GitHub API and everything,
you could do it when the PR is merged. The bot could have a trigger when the PR is merged, that it then harvests all the useful data from the PR, drops it somewhere, and it does that on every merge. That doesn't, yeah. You could only get right permission to an external repository then, so you can't really do malicious stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's better that crawling PRs, because that might make things quite slower. Having the data structured per release, I think that's a better approach. And also that makes tier 2 data more useful, because if they are non-blockers, people will not really care unless it's your system. So that makes tier 2 data actually do something.
Does that mean we'll get pull requests for this from you, Alex? Or okay, anything else? Does anyone see any huge holes in the test configurations that we're considering? Because that's also important to mention, because especially the tier 1 ones will be important.
I think it's less a hole, but how do we, you know, what's the proposal system for adding something new? and promoting or demoting things from tier 1 to tier 2?
Good question. I don't think we discussed that at all. Yeah. How do we figure out when it needs to change and what it needs to change to, and how do we decide on that? Yeah.
Red Hat 10, you know, or
Yeah, when does that become relevant? Yeah.
I mean, one advantage that we have is that we have the survey, and we get some data from the survey, and we need to make sure that what we are testing matches to results that we get from the survey, so that we are really testing environments in the tier.
It's also a good motivation for the users to fill in the survey.
Yeah.
Maybe I've missed it, but are we only using LMOD as a module system, or do we have?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. The idea is here to also test environment modules. Yeah.
Thanks.
but there's also we want a new system or new setup of some description to be that something that somebody wants to work in 6 months or 12 months, add its test for system and start getting information back so they then know.
We're never going to stop people from testing on their own configuration, and we cannot test everybody else's configuration. Is there another comment?
First question, when exactly does the bot start the job? Is this automatically or still triggered by a maintainer?
In at the moment, or what we plan in the future?
What is planned?
I think the idea is to still trigger that by the maintainer.
Okay, otherwise I would have security considerations because there's literally arbitrary code execution in an easy config.
Yeah. We're not going to do that blindly. We may do it for trusted contributors, where we say we'll automatically do a build test, and then I would prefer doing it in like a sandbox environment where you're not potentially wiping all dependencies that all other PRs are relying on, but only for trusted contributors. Yeah, we're not going to blindly test whatever comes in. That's a nightmare. You had another question? Or?
Yep, might make sense to extend it such that some trusted contributors could trigger this even also for other PRs, like those that are like really active, also reviewing others might help the maintainers by just submitting the job. And then an idea I had during lunch that the bot, when it reports success, labels the PR as ready to merge, such that the maintainers don't have to open each one individually, but get it collected.
We already do this right now with Googlebot. There's people outside of the maintainer group that are able to trigger builds already. And yeah, we can do that with this new setup as well.
It can't write labels because then you're back to the permissions problems. So to add a label also requires write permissions to the PR.
I think we need to talk to GitHub about this, because why are they not splitting this up? That doesn't make sense. We cannot be the only ones.
They have infrastructure for this. So this is the whole idea behind GitHub check, is exactly to allow you to do these kind of things without requiring this kind of. So the thing is, that's why you get a check, right? That's why like a GitHub action, it's the same idea, right? A GitHub check is the same thing, except it happens externally, and that has all these. But all these things that you want, it has this tick. You can get it ready to merge, because if you say I require this check to pass before I will merge, it's the same behavior as adding that label.
It's not
right?
fine-grained enough. A tick is Boolean, is true or false. Labels are way more fine-grained. It could be ready to review, ready to merge, ready to test. You cannot do this through GitHub checks. You have a lot more freedom in labels, and it just makes zero sense that you need write permission to the PR branch to be able to comment on a PR. That makes
probably how they represent data internally is connected to
I don't care
right?
how they do it, they have to fix it.
Just do it. Make it happen. I'm sure you're not the first to raise it.
Yeah, maybe we need to look around if others have raised this, but yeah. Anything else? Doing well on time, okay. Yeah, so we hope to get this up and running as soon as possible, right? Because this whole new test environment, and especially this event-based bot, is probably going to allow us to lose less time in processing PR. So it is relevant to being able to stay on top of things. Okay, thanks a lot, Sebastian.